All right. Thank you very much, Susan. Today's presentation is on project and program management, requirements management. And this is the third in a series of presentations that I put together, which I call the 3 R's, requirements management, resource management, and risk management. And those two were presented previously. If you haven't heard those, please go back and review those. Today we're talking about requirements management. And first of all, we're going to talk about what is and what are program and project requirements. We're going to give a definition, we're going to give a purpose, and we're going to give the elements that are involved in requirements management. After that, we're going to talk about accountability. Who is exactly accountable for acquiring and accessing and getting the requirements for our particular projects? We all know that this is a business analyst function, but it's not just a business analyst function, and that's something that we as project management professionals should understand. There are other people involved in gathering those requirements. There are other accountabilities, and we're going to talk about those. Then we're going to talk about requirements from a project management perspective. Okay, we as project management professionals, those of us who are project managers, have a unique perspective on requirements. There are certain things that we want to look for, certain things that are important to us at the project management level, and we're going to talk about what those things are. In addition, we're going to talk about what I call inadequate requirement elicitation. Now, requirement elicitation is the process that business analysts and the rest of us go through to gather requirements, but there are some things that may interfere with getting those requirements and making them defined enough for us to do our jobs. And I call those elements, those things that produce inadequate requirement elicitation. We're going to talk about those, and those include a definition. We're going to talk about the maturity of your organization. That has something to do with your inability to gather requirements as they should be. The level of business analyst staff expertise. Do you have that level of expertise on hand? And also the PM business analyst relationship. This goes back to some things I've talked about in the past. Project relationship management. Your business analyst is a subject matter expert, and you must have a relationship with that business analyst. And we're going to talk about that too and why it's important. Then we're going to talk about the business analyst function itself. This presentation isn't directed at business analysts per se, but it's necessary that we as project management professionals know what's involved in business analysis, okay? Because sometimes we are required, based on situations and circumstances, to take over that function, okay? And we want to know the types of things that are involved and then gathering those requirements. And lastly, we're going to talk about requirements management. Now, requirements management, I believe, is an area where we sometimes drop the ball. Okay, we elicit our requirements, we gather them, we put them together in a nice binder, and then from that point on throughout the project, we don't manage them. Okay, so we're going to talk about what's necessary to manage those requirements and why that's important. Let's talk about requirements. What are project and program requirements? As most of us know, those requirements are those conditions and tasks that we need to complete to ensure the success of the project, okay? They are the driving force behind what we're trying to deliver, okay? We have to align the project's resources. That's that term again, one of the presentations that we talked about previously, project resources and the objectives of the organization, okay? And we want to talk about what are the benefits of effectively gathering those particular requirements, okay? They contribute to higher success rates, change management, that type of thing. So from just that definition, we can see the importance of program and project requirements. Why do we want to manage these requirements? Okay, I've got a bullet point, some bullet points there of why we want to manage the requirements. Again, not just gathering them, not just collecting them, but after we've done that, we want to manage them throughout the course of the project. Okay, the one at the bottom there, the bullet point, enabling effective scope management. This ties directly into managing the scope of our project. Okay, this is what happens, and this is what we want to use in conjunction with preventing what we call gold plating to projects, adding unnecessary types of requirements that are just cosmetic in nature, and we want to prevent scope creep. Okay, so when we're talking about managing our scope, we must include management of the requirements. Why do we want to manage those requirements again? This slide shows what I have here are some statistics gathered by some reputable companies and firms in our industry. And what they found is that we don't believe that program and project requirements are important. Okay, looking at the statistics that they've gathered, they found that at a really high level, at a business level, the organization takes all of these types of things into consideration. It's important at that level. But for some reason, when it gets down to us, when those project initiatives come down to us and they land on our desks, for some reason, we don't think that they're as important as we should. Okay? And some of the things that they pointed out with incomplete requirements and they don't meet acceptance criteria, that's mainly because the requirements are not followed throughout the project and are not maintained throughout the project. The requirements are gathered at the beginning and then they sit on someone's desk and they're referred to and as references ever so often, but they're not maintained, they're not upgraded. And consequently, at the end of a project, we either have something or a deliverable that's inadequate or something that really doesn't meet new criteria that the users have requested. Let's talk about project and program requirements categories. There are three categories. They're business, the solution, and the stakeholder. These are the requirements categories. So I want you to keep those in perspective as we move forward here. If you look at the business requirements, as I said, these requirements are initiatives from executive management within an organization. They come from the top down, and they are associated with the needs of the business. Remember, projects are strategic initiatives, and businesses would not fund and promote and require projects if they didn't meet business needs, okay? If they weren't initiatives that the company felt or the organization felt is in their best interest. So all of those requirements are coming from the top down, and they address what's required and why the project is happening. Okay, it's important to notice also that these requirements are communicated clearly and early on. When we're talking about requirements management, as we said, it's the beginning to the end of the project type of a process. Okay, we want these definite and defined in detail early on in the project, and we want them maintained in that manner throughout the project. The solution requirements, that includes the functionality of the requirements, both what we call a functional and non-functional level, okay? What is this particular requirement going to solve, okay? All right, we want to get a certain point or a certain end or a certain outcome to a deliverable. Exactly what is that deliverable supposed to do for us? Okay, that comes under the heading of the solution requirements. Stakeholder requirements. That's the third category of requirements. Now, this one is important because these are the people who hold the purse strings. These are the people who are funding the project. These are the people who have bought into the project. And we want to make sure that our business analysis and our requirements management involves making sure that we are up to date and continuously informed on what their particular requirements are. Okay, they may be internal, they may be external. And at this point, well, one point that we want to remember is the bullet point that I have at the bottom there, that every individual stakeholder has specific requirements, and they all feel that their requirements are the most important. Okay, they may have 10 requirements, and if you were to ask them, well, which of these are your priorities, which are important, and they will say that all of them are important. Okay, but we know that's not to be the case. We know that there are some requirements that are absolutely necessary, absolutely positively needed on day one. I came out of IT. On day one of an IT project going live, these are the absolute essentials that they have to need. And those are the ones that we want to put at the top. Those are the ones that we want to make sure that our business analysis evaluations point out. Okay, why is that? Because it's from this that we're going to be developing our project plan, our project schedule, and allocating our resources throughout the project. Let's talk about requirements accountability. Exactly who's responsible for gathering these requirements, and exactly what requirements are they responsible for gathering. Okay. The chief person who gathers the business requirements for your project are business analysts. Okay. And I've got here some bullet points on the types of roles that the business analyst does and what's involved. This particular presentation is not directed at business analysts, but what I want you to understand that working with your business analyst is essential as you go through your project in the area of requirements management. Okay, this is a team type of a thing. It's not just a business analyst, and depending on the layout of your organization, you may have business analysts who go from project to project, getting the requirements, and once they've got the requirements for a particular project, they move on to another project. Or you may have a business analyst who is assigned specifically to your area that you're going to be working with throughout the project. In any case, you want to make sure that you develop a relationship with that business analyst because you're going to be working with them throughout the project. Stakeholders and other project personnel also contribute, okay, to requirements, okay? They could be anybody, customers and team members, okay? We want to make sure that the stakeholders are involved in gathering this information, okay? We want to gain that good relationship and managing our relationships at this level with our stakeholders and with our project personnel. Okay, we must have well-defined requirements if we want to manage that particular relationship with our stakeholders. Okay, we want to be in touch with them. We want to have their ear. We want them to have our ear insofar as their requirements, because requirements change throughout projects. If you start a project in January of one year and the project doesn't end for 2 years, I guarantee you the requirements in that project are going to change. Okay, so we want, again, an ongoing relationship at that level with our stakeholders and our project personnel. Again, with our stakeholders and project personnel, these are some of the other people and some of the other positions that you're going to be interacting with. As you can see, your business analyst is there, but you also have others. And we tend to believe, and statistics and surveys will bear this out, that it's the business analyst that we're only involved when we're talking about requirements, okay? We're only involved with the business analyst, and we're only involved with that analyst prior to the start of the project when they've completed their initial requirements gathering. That's the falsehood that I want to dispel in this presentation. You're not through with your business analysts when they completed the initial gathering of requirements. And you're also involved with other people insofar as continuously gathering and monitoring those requirements as the project goes on. Again, with our stakeholders and our project personnel, one of the main documents that we want to gather all of when we're talking about requirements management, we want to create a requirements management plan. Okay, we want to have a plan as to how we're going to do this. And as you can see on my bullet points there, the management plan is created by the business analyst with input from the project manager. Again, this is not an individual task solely for a business analyst, okay? And the people who approve those requirements, of course, are your leaders, and I say software development there simply because I came out of IT, but it's the leaders and your stakeholders who approve and address those requirements, okay? And who maintains that? That's a business analyst function, okay? Project managers don't normally maintain a requirements plan, okay? However, if you happen to be a business analyst who is also a project manager, you will be required to maintain that plan. We're project managers. Let's talk about the requirements from the project manager's perspective. You've got your business analysts and your additional personnel, and you've been working with them, and you put together this fine and beautiful document that they're sitting on your desk right now that says requirements. When you pick up that document, you in your position as a project manager, there are certain things that you want to look for and certain things that you have to have in detail in order to do your job. And those three things are your requirements artifacts, your requirements types, and your requirements traceability. Okay, if you pick up the requirements document from your business personnel, if they're competent, sophisticated insofar as gathering their requirements, there are going to be sections in that document that talk about requirements, artifacts, types, and traceability. This is the area that you're concerned about. This is the area that you want to focus on as a project manager, okay? If you're doing the business analysis function as a project manager, you want to pay particular time and attention to these areas, okay? Because it is from these areas that you're going to be building your project plan, your project schedule, and allocating of your resources over the length of the term of the project. So you pick up that document, you look at the table of contents, you as a project management professional can flip right to these particular areas. Okay, the other areas are important, but these are the areas that you want to focus on, okay? Let's talk about artifacts. What are artifacts? Artifacts are the documentation that's involved with the project, the documentation that's been gathered by the business analyst, you working in conjunction with the business analyst and other input personnel. Okay, it's use cases, design documents, all of that good stuff that we like to look at as IT professionals. All of that documentation is going to be there. It has to be in detail, okay? It has to cover a lot of different bases. It has to be in detail depending on your organization and the aspects of your organization that you're going to be working with, the tools that you have in place, and those accountabilities. Next, we're talking about requirement types. Now, there are three requirement types. There are business requirements, user requirements, and system requirements. And systems simply because, as I said, I came out of IT, okay? Those requirements enable us to determine the business requirements that were initially advanced by the business people at the top of the pyramid, and by the time that they get down to us, we want to have, in addition to that, any type of user requirements and system requirements. Okay, this is the second aspect of the big three that we want to look at as project management professionals. How detailed are my requirements types? What's involved in that? Okay, are we talking the scope of the project? Yes, we are. We're talking the business objectives? Yes, we are. Okay, we're talking user points of view and user goals. We're talking the functionality when we're talking about the systems requirements. So that second part of the big three there that we're looking at with requirements, the types, those are the types of things that we're looking for. The third of those requirements in that big three is requirements traceability. Now, what's traceability? We start at the business requirements, again, developed at the high level. We go through our stakeholders, who's involved. We're looking for particular solutions and requirements. What are we expectations there? What are we proposing? We come through with some business scenarios of how we want these things to work, user cases, that type of thing. And this allows us to develop our test cases. Okay? This is the third of the big three that you're going to be looking for when you pick up that requirements documents. Traceability is important. It's one of the more, I think it's the more important of the three. And we're going to talk a little bit more about traceability and why it's important. But as a project management professional, those are the three things that you're going to be looking for. You want detail in that respect. And if you have any questions, you're going to be asking your questions from the perspective of those three particular topics. Okay? Let's talk about what I call inadequate requirement elicitation. Now, requirement elicitation is actually going out and gathering the information, okay? All right? Requirements are usually not written down anywhere, okay? They're not written down anywhere. They're in people's minds. They're some clerk someplace who's been around for 20 years knows what's necessary. They've never written anything down, but they have a good understanding of what's necessary to do the job. So you've got to be able to go out among the user personnel, among the stakeholders, and gather this particular information, okay? You're going to have some documentation, but be forewarned, don't rely simply on documentation that's written down any place at any point in time, simply because documentation tends never to be upgraded, never to be updated, okay? It's always behind what is actually out there or what's actually being used, okay? So let's talk about those other elements of inadequate requirements. The maturity level of your organization, okay? If your organization is not mature, and what I have there to the right is our PMM maturity model, shows levels of organization. I've talked about that in previous presentations. How sophisticated is your organization? Do you have high-level business analysts available to you? Okay. All right. How many of those do you have? Okay. What's the level of their expertise in your organization? Do you have any at all? Okay. That comes into play. Okay, and depending on the maturity level of your organization, that will determine the expertise of the people that you have on hand. If you don't have that expertise on hand, you will probably be required to elicit some of these types of requirements, okay? The business and the PM analyst relationship is important here. The reason you want to maintain a good relationship is that you want to be able to work with that business analyst throughout the project, okay? If you don't have a good relationship with them, you're going to lose the ability to gather a lot of information simply by the expertise that they have. So you want to have a good relationship with them, okay? That can affect inadequate requirements elicitation. Continuing with that inadequate elicitation, what else contributes to that? Okay, once you gather that information, okay, you want to confirm it, okay? Now, this is from the business analyst perspective. This is from your perspective, okay? If you have not been involved to a great extent in working with your business analyst up until this point, this is the time that you want to get involved, okay? You have to get involved at this time. Because when the business analysts and you work together and you gather the information, you're going to have a meeting or a series of meetings with stakeholders, okay? And in those meetings, you're going to determine, yes, this is what we've gathered. Is this what you expect? Okay, you want their sign off. You want to determine, you want it to be accepted, and you want mutual understanding and consensus from those involved. Now, here's a tip. In these meetings, these are not your meetings as project managers. These are business analyst meetings, okay? They are leading the meeting. It's their meeting. You are a stakeholder at this point, but you're not a stakeholder who's there to ask questions. Okay, if you have any questions, you've taken some notes, you confer with the business analysts after these meetings have taken place. Why do you want to do that? You don't want to set up a situation in the meeting, and we're talking about relationships here and managing those. You don't want to set up situations in the meeting where you could put the business analyst on the spot, or it seems like you're challenging what they've gathered in the requirements, that type of thing. Remember, there's a point in time. If you have questions after that meeting, make sure that you confer with the business analyst after that. But it's not a point, you don't want to make that meeting a point of contention between you and the analyst, between you and the stakeholders. You're simply there as an observer, as a note collector, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Why is that? Because, again, this is where you're going to be building your project plan from, okay? This is where you're going to be building your schedule for, okay? This is where you're going to be aligning your vendors and your plan throughout the course of the project. So when you start off, you want to make sure that everybody's in agreement. Let's talk about the business analysis function. Of course, I'm not directing this presentation at business analysts, but again, you as a project manager may be called upon to do some of this functionality, okay? Again, depending on how sophisticated that organization is, if you don't have high-level business analysts, if you don't have business analysts on board, you will be required to do some of this type of function, okay? I myself came out of being a business analyst before I got into project management. That's why I'm well aware of the importance of knowing the functionality involved here, okay? I never started off to be a project manager. I was a business analyst, and when I gathered the information, my boss called me in one day and said, we need somebody to manage the project. You're it, okay? And all of a sudden, I'm a project manager, okay? So, but it did help me in that I was well aware of what I needed to be able to look for when that business analyst put that documentation on my desk, put that completed management plan on my desk, okay? I knew what I needed to be able to look for. That's why I know the big three that we talked about from your perspective, the artifacts, the types, and the traceability. That's why I know that those are the important things that you want to look at. Now, if you're talking that business analysis function, and you may be required to do this, I have 5 ways listed here for gathering and what I call requirements solicitation, gathering the requirements. I have workshops, interviews, observations, process analysis, and user stories. Now, I'm well aware that there are more ways to do this, but just for our discussion, we'll talk about those 5. We all know what workshops are, okay? The thing here that I want to point out about workshops is that when we're dealing with gathering requirements, the problem that you're going to run into with workshops is that you can't get everybody together that you need at a particular place at a particular time. Everybody's schedule is in conflict. So workshops may not be the way to do it, okay? Depending on your organization, depending on the levels that you're dealing with, those people that you meet may not be available. That's an option, but in your case, you have to determine if it is the appropriate option for you, all right? Your option may be better for interviews. If you have a situation where you can't get all of those people together at a particular point in time, you want to interview. And those are some points there that I have about the interview, some things that you want to make sure that you do when you're involved with your interviewing techniques and you're involved with gathering that information and scheduling those interviews. The bullet point at the bottom there is the one that I want to highlight here. We have to understand that if you have interviews, you're probably going to have follow-up conversations, okay? It's not just necessary to just schedule an interview, or I've done the interview with the VP of accounting, and that's that. You may need to call back and come back to those people again as a secondary follow-up interview. Plan for that type of thing. Let those people know that, yes, I've interviewed you, but I will be able to call back. And I may have to get back to you. You want to let them know that. Because what I found out is if you do the interview and then you have to come back to them, and especially people at certain levels, very busy people, oh, I thought we already had this interview. You want to let them know up front that you're going to probably be back perhaps to ask some additional questions. Observations is another way to elicit requirements, and this is more or less just watching how people do things, okay? You want to know the project needs, you just shadow someone. You just sit there by their desk of a user and you watch them go through the processes of how they'll be doing things, and you get an idea of the functionality of the particular operation. That's the way to elicit and gather information. Another is process analysis. Okay, now this is the one where we go back to our systems diagrams and we go to our subject matter experts, our systems analysts, and we want to see the processes behind the scenes and how they actually work. Again, if you're going to be looking at documentation, it may not be up to date, so you want to talk to the actual people who are working with these particular processes. Okay, we want to look at the processes as they exist, look at our requirements and see what's necessary to be done and plan for that in our project plan insofar as changing any type of the processes that might be involved. But in this particular case, you may not be talking with end users, you may be talking with actual systems people who are involved in developing and maintaining those processes. User stories. You want to work in conjunction with your business analyst for user stories. User stories are stories that you put together, sort of a storyboard of functionality insofar as how things work, okay? We would work with the business analysts of this. If you haven't worked with them, please use their expertise in gathering user stories. They're very familiar with this process. This is a keystone of how they gather particular information. So rely on them when developing user stories with them. Use that functionality in-house. If you don't have that particular expertise in-house, brush up on, do some reading and whatever on how you formulate and gather user stories if you're going to be using this as a particular technique. Some things to remember about that business analysis function: it's an ongoing process. Okay, as I said before, it's not just gathering information in the beginning and then we're through with it. It's going to be ongoing. It's not going to be something that you gather solely prior to the beginning of the project. It's going to take place throughout the cycle of the project. Okay, so for example, if you have a business analyst, as I mentioned in a situation before, that goes from project to project gathering requirements on that particular project, you may be left after that business analyst has moved on. They may not be available. You may need to go on and continue to do that business analysis functionality. That's why it's necessary that you understand what's involved and what's necessary. Okay, we've worked with our business analysts. Okay, we've worked with all of our subject matter experts. We've gathered it. We've gone through the proper processes to gather all of our requirements, and we've been following things to the letter. Okay, and this is where most of us drop the ball, and statistics and surveys have proven this, can bear this out. We don't put together requirements management plan. We don't put together a management plan for requirements. We don't see requirements management as a necessary aspect of managing our project. Okay, and this is something that we want to work toward. We want to dispel that notion that once we've gathered the requirements, there's no need to maintain them and there's no need to management. There certainly is. Okay, and we describe that as a process of documenting, analyzing, tracing, prioritizing, manage requirements. Okay, and controlling change. Okay, that's the important part of that definition that I want to emphasize. Controlling change, as we said, those requirements are going to change throughout the course of the project. Okay, depending on the length of the project, the higher probability that things are going to change. We want to put in a mechanism that's going to control that change and communicate that change effectively. Okay? Okay? It's a continuous process, okay? And it's a requirement, it's a capability to which a project outcome, okay, that leads directly to our project outcome. But the main point here is we want to control change, okay? If you look at the requirements management, there are certain aspects and components, and there's a process involved here, okay? And what I've listed here are elements of that requirements management process. All the things I have here are part of that process, okay? Okay. Down at the bottom there, I've got two that I want to emphasize here. Monitor and track those requirements and manage and control changes to the requirements. Okay. Those are the two things that we want to do and emphasize when we're talking about the management process. Okay. It all boils down to those. We're continuously gathering and eliciting requirements. We're continually analyzing. That's going on. But the main outcome of this that we want is we want to manage and control those changes, and we want to monitor those in that process. Other components that we're talking about in that process. We need to have a process that pulls all of those steps together. That process, we want to have it to be repeatable. Okay, these are certain things that when we're putting that process together, we want to keep in mind. Okay, we want to have documentation that articulates that particular process. We want everybody to understand what's involved in that process. Now, you're working together with your business analyst. You want to sit down and make sure that it's understandable for everybody who's working in the process. And you want to make sure that you two or you three understand what's going on, how we're going to handle that process, and how that process is going to be used and developed throughout the course of the project. Now, if you're at a higher management level in the PMO, if you're at an executive level, these are the types of things that you manage, or not manage, but you articulate, document at that level, and it goes down through the organization. This is the way we as project managers do this in ABC Corporation. These are best practices. These are guidelines that are established at a higher level. So whenever we're working with a business analyst in your organization, that business analyst knows what's necessary, what's expected, and how things are done. Your project managers know what's expected, and how things are done in your organization. So if we're talking at the top level of our PMOs and our executive management, these are the types of things that come from the top down. Okay. One tip that I've got for you at the bottom there, that project change management control. You're going to have change management throughout your project. How you manage change throughout the project, how you manage change in your organization. Okay. Requirements management is going to be a part of that. Scope is a part of that. Requirements management also. What we found is that requirements management, when we're talking about our project change management processes, requirements management is not listed there. Okay. We want to change that thinking. Okay. We want requirements management to be a part of that. After we put together the components in our lists and our processes, we want to develop a plan. That's the outcome of putting those processes together. That's the outcome of putting those steps together. We want to create a plan. And that plan is going to involve, of course, our stakeholders, our requirements management process that we talked about, our requirement define our types that we talked about. We're going to map out our artifacts. So we talked about those, and we're going to prioritize our requirements. Okay. And that one at the bottom is the important one there. And all of them are important, but we want to emphasize, prioritize those requirements. Every stakeholder that we get, everyone has their own set of requirements, and as I said earlier, they all think they're important. They're the most important in the project. They don't really care about anyone else's requirements, and they're all going to be hammering on you to get in their 10 requirements, some of which are just nice to have. Some of them are cosmetic, but they feel they're important. Don't allow yourself to be pressured into that type of a situation, and you do this by making sure that you have a priority of requirements, okay? And with our requirements management plan, that's an aspect. That's what we want to come out of that plan with. A, B, C, and D. We actually have to absolutely, positively have that in when we go live, okay? That's what we want to focus on. Okay, in that requirements management plan, again, there's that word again, traceable. Traceability, one of the three main components that you're looking for when you pick up that requirements document. Traceability, we want to make it traceable. Okay, we want to know the top components that are involved in good requirements management. You want to make sure that it's traceable. Trace that requirement. If that requirement changes or is added, you've originally put together that traceability aspect of your requirements management documentation. You want to make sure that that new element, that upgraded element that you're looking at is traceable. You want to go through the traceability process. Why do you want to do that? You want to make sure that you don't introduce any new risk. Okay, you want to make sure that if new risks are introduced, you have a plan to address those risks. You want to make sure that you're not introducing anything that's going to impact the outcome of what you're trying to deliver. And if it does impact that outcome, okay, you want to have a plan for addressing it. In that plan, you want to incorporate a numbering version system. We want number 1.0, number 1.1. We want to be able to trace how these particular processes and requirements have evolved. Why do we want to do that? We want a paper trail. Okay, if there are any questions that come along down the line, well, why are we doing this? When did we make that change? We have it available. Okay, at the end of our projects, when we go back and we look at our lessons learned, we can use that requirements documentation and that plan to note how things change and to better see if we could have planned our project better. Okay, there's a communications plan involved. That again, that communications is across the board. We got to have, but an aspect of that requirements management, how are we going to communicate this to those involved, to the higher levels, to the stakeholders? What do they need to know, and how do we intend to communicate that to them? That's a part of that plan as well. Continuing with aspects and components, I've listed here what I consider to be some critical success factors, okay, if we're talking and putting that plan together, okay? First two, I say work two, and when I'm describing my work, first two bullet points, we want to ensure that that plan is implemented, okay, at the start, and we want to maintain it throughout. Okay, we want to work to ensure that everybody involved, customers, stakeholders, are all involved in that requirements management process. Okay, now these are success features. These are things that you want to follow. And you want to try to ensure that all team members understand what's going on. Okay, I find that people, those that you work with, are more involved if they understand why we're doing a particular thing, as opposed to just being assigned to do it, just being saying that this is necessary. If they understand why we're doing it, they'll be more inclined to work with us and helping us maintain this documentation and be more involved when we need their input. Other critical success factors for requirements management, okay? Good communication among the team, okay? We want to also ensure that the analysts have the discipline to maintain this documentation, okay? Again, if you're a business analyst, you've got this good working relationship, you want to just bring it up every so often. You know, are we maintaining that? Oh, we made a requirements change, we better update the documentation. You want to be on top of that. And again, if in your organization you happen to be doing the business analyst function, you want to make sure that you realize the importance of maintaining that documentation, okay? Let's talk about some requirements management best practices. Don't underestimate the importance of requirements management. This is something I think that we have been doing as project management professionals. And as if I were to go back to the three-part series that I put together here, resource management, risk management, requirements management, in each of those situations, what I've found, and this comes from reliable sources of data and surveys, these things are important and are highly involved in decision-making at the highest levels of the organization. But for some reason, when these initiatives are passed down to us at the project management level, we don't think they're important enough to even put together a plan. Okay, we get involved with these types of aspects of project management and managing our projects when a crisis occurs. Okay, when it's obvious that we need to have a plan to manage this type of thing, then we decide that we're going to put a plan together. I want to try to reverse that trend. Okay, we need to bring these types of plans up front, and then no matter the size of your project, if you're on a small project, you want to jump through the hoops. Okay, you want to bring these things up early in the project, and if it's only 2 pages, you want to know that you addressed it. And if we're at the project management, at the PMO level, we're executives, we want our project managers to understand. We want you to jump through the hoops, okay? You may not have a detailed management plan for resources or for risk or for requirements, okay? But we want to see 2 pages, okay? We want to know that you're going through the process. We want to know that you at least given this some thought, okay? Why is that important to you as a project management professional? That you learn this early in your career and you continue to do it as a part of how you do things. Because when you get to a senior project management level and you're juggling multiple projects and you're juggling multiple vendors and multiple schedules and multiple stakeholders with varying agendas, it's going to become obvious when you have not become proficient in handling these types of management processes, okay? It may not show up now when you're dealing with 1 or 2 projects, but believe me, it will show up and come to light when you're handling multiple projects, okay? So you want to get into the habit. You want it to become best practices. You want it to become the way that you do things and jump through the hoops. Don't underestimate that its importance, okay? As I said, research has shown that these are important. Requirement management involves a PM and a BA partnership, okay? Be tied to the hip to some extent with that business analyst that you're working with, okay? Okay, have a cup of coffee sometime. Create a relationship with them, okay? Again, managing your relationships throughout the project. This is one that you want to manage and maintain, okay? All right, the requirements management plan should be early in the project, okay? Let's not wait until we've got a crisis to decide how we're going to do this. Let's have become aware and give thought to this early in the process, okay? If you don't plan early with this, it's going to hurt you further down the line, okay? And guarantee, I know, okay? All right. The other thing that we want to look for, if we're talking best practices, is don't underestimate the importance of business analysis. It's not something, as I said, that we do up front and we forget about. You want detail in those big 3, those aspects that we talked about from the PM perspective, the artifacts, the types, and the traceability. When you pick up that document, okay, and you look through it, you want detail at those 3 levels, okay? It's important from a business analyst perspective. Those of you business analysts out there, your project managers, when you pass that document along, that's the area that they're going to be most interested in. That's what they're going to be looking at. Don't underestimate the importance of that. Don't underestimate the in-depth detail of that particular area, all right? Become early, involved early, and often see your project's business analyst relationship as ongoing, okay? Business analysis is important. Make sure that you have an understanding of what's necessary to be a business analyst, okay? That's the only way that you'll be able to ask the types of questions that you need to ask to make sure that you're getting the information that you need, okay? Coming up to my conclusion here. Some things I want to point out, okay? The importance of requirements management. At the top of the business chain, the business executives, they think it's important. That's a part of what they're putting together, and when they put together initiatives that come down to us at our level, remember projects or business initiatives, they considered the requirements that are going to be necessary to get this done. It's important at that level. It should be just as important at our level, okay? Strategy should not be treated as just a business analyst function, okay? You are heavily involved as a project manager in the business analysis aspect of your particular project, okay? You want to develop a good relationship. You want to develop a relationship that's ongoing. And not only with the business analyst, it's for everyone who puts business and who contributes to the business analysis function, the business analysis plan, okay? These are ongoing things throughout the project. You want to have an understanding of business analysis and what goes into being a business analysis. You may be required to do that particular function, okay? And it's not unheard of for you to be both business analyst and project manager. As your organization becomes more sophisticated, okay, and as you move up the level of that maturity model that we talked about, your organization becomes more sophisticated. You are going to have people who are more sophisticated, more talented, more experienced, and some of that may not fall on you, but prior to that, you need to be able to know what's involved in being a business analyst, okay? And of course, studies and statistics bear out that our most successful project managers realize and understand this. Those who have moved their organizations up the maturity model level to additional and higher models of maturity in their organization, they understand this. Okay, executives of PMOs and at PMO levels who have been able to move their organizations to more mature organizations and aspects of dealing and building PMOs, they understand this. And I think that we as project management professionals need to understand that, and we need to understand how important that is. Okay. One more thing I want to add for my conclusion. Something interesting I found as I was putting together this three-part series, risk management, requirements management, and resource management. I found that statistics bear out the fact of the importance of these particular items and disciplines in managing the success of projects. Organizations have done surveys, and they found out how important this is at higher levels. I've also found that we don't consider these to be as important when it lands on our desk at the project management level. I think that this needs to change. I think that this may be an element that contributes to the continued high failure rate of our projects. Okay, we're continuously talking, depending on whose data you're looking at, depending on whose survey you're quoting. We're continuously looking at 50, 60, and higher % failure rates on projects. And I personally believe that some of these types of things, our overlooking, our not feeling as important, our elementary understanding of some of the importance of some of these types of things is what's hurting us in that respect. I think we need to kick things up a notch. I think that responsibility falls not only on us as project managers, but also our project management leadership personnel, our executives, our PMOs. They have to realize the importance of these things, and it should become a part of the way their organization does things. We have to emphasize that to the people who report to us, make it part of our organization, enforce it, make it a guideline, and make sure that these particular disciplines are followed. That concludes my presentation, and those are some of my references. If you want to look into those, also be aware that if you want a copy of the presentation, please just email me, and I'll be glad to send you a copy of that presentation in PDF format. If you have any questions, I receive a lot of questions at the end of presentations. No problem whatsoever. Send me those via email, and I'll do my very best to answer them for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruffin.
Thank you so much. It was great being here, and it's always a pleasure.